Section we talked about fish safety and sampling efficiency. In this last section, we're going to talk about human safety, so being safe while operating an electrofisher. Here's an example of someone who is unsafe operating an electrofisher. Just like how larger fish are more affected by the electricity field from your backpack electrofisher, you as a large human are very susceptible to these electrical fields. This is something that you do not want to do, so you do not want to be just standing in the water. This person is most definitely feeling the effects of this backpack electrofisher here. So when you talk about safety, what this really comes down to is the fact that you are putting an electrical current through water. And just like they tell you not to blow dry your hair while you're in the bathtub, electricity and water are really unsafe. So there's a lot of safety concerns that you need to consider with this. And what it really comes down to is what is a good conductor and what is not a good conductor. So when on the left-hand side here, we have conductors. These are good conductors of electricity. So electricity will flow really easily through a lot of metals, so copper, gold, steel, aluminum, things like that. Whereas insulators are things that protect you from electricity. So they basically block the electrical flow. Rubber, dry air, gas, deionized water, so water that has no ions in it. These are all really good insulators. And in the middle, we have semiconductors: salt water, freshwater, rainwater, fish, people. We are all semiconductors. So we are basically just bags of salty water. So we do also conduct electricity, and that's why we can feel the effects of a backpack electrofisher if you're not taking proper safety precautions. All electrofishers, backpack and boat electrofishers, have enough power to kill a human. These can be lethal, and the safety components of operating a backpack electrofisher need to be taken really seriously. This is not something that it's school, so we're going to be extra super duper safe. This is something that even the consulting firm that I worked for, which definitely did not have the biggest emphasis on safety. Everyone was super cautious about using a backpack electrofisher because it can be super dangerous. Most of the time, you are not operating a backpack electrofisher at anywhere near the voltage and settings that are going to be high enough to actually kill a human. However, you always want to assume that it might be high enough to kill you. So you don't know when someone else has the electrofisher on them. If they accidentally set the voltage to 900 instead of 90, you don't know if the backpack electrofisher is on the fritz and is accidentally putting out more more electricity than it actually says it is. So you always need to operate under the assumption that it could be high enough to kill you, like the setting could be high enough to kill you. That's why personal protection is so important. When you are backpack electrofishing, it is required that you have waders with no holes. So recall when we talk about insulators versus things that conduct electricity, insulating properties include rubber, air, for example. So when you're wearing your waders, you're dry on the inside, and that's going to insulate you completely against the electricity. So if you have a hole in your wader, it now defeats the purpose of having an insulating layer because water is now leaking into your layer, and that water is going to conduct electricity into your leg. When you are electrofishing, I have definitely electrofished with tiny holes in my waders, and it does not feel good. It feels like someone is stabbing you with a needle. If you get a full blast of an electrofisher, non-lethal blast, it feels kind of like touching an electric fence. It does not feel good. So you want to make sure you have no holes in your waders. It's also important that you have proper footwear. So you need to have wading boots, something that you're going to be stable. If you fall into the water and get submerged when the electrofisher is on, you're going to get a full dose of electricity. Don't feel good. Doesn't feel good. And then lastly, lineman gloves. These are rubber gloves shown here at the right. You need to have something on your hands that's going to protect your hands. When you're holding a net, it's usually made of metal, so it usually has a metal handle, and that's going to conduct electricity really well. Even if you have a wooden handled net, just because you're working in water, it's probably going to get wet, and that water is going to conduct electricity. I would say probably the one thing that I see people skimping on, which is totally not okay to skimp on, is the gloves. So I do see people sometimes that do not wear gloves. I will say that has become a lot less common nowadays than it was even a few years ago. So you need to wear gloves at some point. The whole idea is that your gloves are dry inside the hand. I also recommend wearing a brimmed hat and polarized sunglasses, and that's just because these two pieces of clothing are going to make it a lot easier to see the fish. When the fish are stunned, it's like a really fast reaction, so you have to be very fast with netting them. And a brimmed hat to block out the sun and the glare, and polarized sunglasses are really going to help a lot. The backpack electrofisher itself also has safety features. So this is some safety features that the Smith Root backpack electrofisher has. It has a tilt switch. So if you're wearing the backpack electrofisher and you bend over too far, it has this really annoying like beep, and it turns off. This is handy because if you are wearing the electrofisher and you fall into the water, it's going to turn off as soon as you start to bend over. It's super annoying when you're like trying to climb over a log jam and all you hear is like beep, 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 and you're like, no. But it's a good safety fixture. There's also a switch on the anoid pole that you depress. And so the actual switch is in your hand, and that allows you to turn it off very, very quickly. Basically, you just release your thumb and it releases the switch. The audible signal, like I said, that's like an annoying beep that tells you that it's on. Oh, I guess the audible signal is different. So there's a tilt switch signal, and then there's also a signal for when it's on. It's like beep, 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 beep. So every time it's on, you just hear this constant beep. And that's a good reminder that you're actively electrofishing. There's an emergency kill switch here at the top. So to turn it on, you have to pop this button up. To turn the whole thing off, you basically just hit this button. And this is nice because if you have the electrofishing settings turned up really high, one of the effects of that is it can be cause you to basically freeze up. So if you are operating the electrofisher and I don't know, you accidentally stick your hand in the water, you might not actually be able to remove your thumb from the anoid pull switch because you're going to be like frozen in place. So that emergency kill switch is nice because anyone can come over and just hit that button and it'll shut the whole thing down. They also have an immersion sensor. So if you go above like about right here, so waist deep water, it's going to shut the whole thing down. And that's just to stop it from operating if you accidentally fall in the water. There's an electroid out of water sensor. So if you have either the anoid or the cathode out of the water, it beeps really annoyingly and it stops conducting electricity. And lastly, a visual sensor. On this one, I believe it's here. Yeah, right here. So this flashes red in addition to that audible signal, that beep, 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 to let everyone around know that the electrofisher is on. So those are the backpack electrofishers for Smith Root backpack electrofishers. In terms of best practices for operational safety, you want to walk slowly. So this is not something you want to rush through. You can only electrofish it in places that you can actually wade. So you can't go out in really deep water or really swift water. You don't want to electrofish if water gets in your waders or in your gloves. So that means that you're no longer being insulated. You're going to have to change out your waders and clothes or change out your gloves. You want to watch and warn spectators. This is something that's really important when you're electrofishing in urban areas like in Whatcom and Skagit counties. These are places that other people might be. If someone's fishing in the river or someone's dog runs in the river, they're going to feel the effects of the electrofisher if they're close enough. So you really want to watch and make sure that you're warning people and there's no one in the water, for example, where you're electrofishing. And lastly, do not touch the electrodes. If you need to make adjustments on the electrodes, you need to disconnect the entire electrode, so unscrew it from the unit to make sure it's not on. Never touch it, even if you're like, I'm not pressing the switch, so it's not on, because again, you always want to operate with the idea that it might be on, and the electrode is the place that has the highest electrical output. I also recommend having verbal commands. It can feel kind of corny to do this, but I found in my last job that this is something that is really helpful with communicating with your field crew. So before you start electrofishing, just say shocking and then start electrofishing. And that tells everyone around you, that your field crew, that you are actively electrofishing and they need to be on guard. When someone yells stop, you want to reserve that for when you want to stop the electrofisher right now. So if you are like about to fall in the water, yell stop. Or if you're tripping or something like that, or if you have a fish in your net, or sometimes you need to reach down in the water to like grab a fish that's like wedged in between rocks, yell stop. And that's the code for like stop electrofishing right this minute.